He walked in like a ghost but left the whole building haunted. At exactly 8:01 a.m., the doors of the Crestwood Financial Tower parted with a soft hiss. Inside, the marble gleamed like ice, and the scent of imported leather, espresso, and cold ambition filled the air. Everyone here had a purpose, and everyone here had a look. Except him. No one knew his name. No one cared. He wasn't supposed to be here. His coat was dusty, too large for his shoulders. His hair was neat but unstyled. His skin, a rich brown, stood out in a sea of polished porcelain. He walked with the kind of stillness that unnerved people, like he was used to being ignored or underestimated. He passed the concierge without slowing. No ID badge, no suit. No visible reason to exist in a place like this. Within 30 seconds, security noticed. By the time he reached the 30th floor, the boardroom floor, he'd triggered 3 silent alarms, 5 curious glances, and 1 very angry assistant. "Sir," she barked, heels clacking across the floor like a warning shot. "You're not supposed to be here. This is a private floor." He stopped, looked around. The hallway was flooded with morning light, walls lined with million-dollar art pieces no one actually appreciated. "I know where I am," he said calmly. The assistant's eyes narrowed. "Then you know this isn't open to the public." A few board members peeked through the glass doors of the meeting room. They saw a black man, alone, uninvited, dressed like he had walked 10 blocks in a thunderstorm and dared the rain to touch him. "Security is on the way," she said, her voice louder now, drawing more eyes. "I suggest you leave before." He pulled something from his pocket. Not a weapon, a pen, then a folded letter, then silence. He held it out, not aggressively, but with a confidence that made her hesitate. "What is this?" she asked. He answered with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. Proof. It wasn't just the paper. It was the way he stood. The way he waited, not like someone hoping for permission, but like someone who'd already been invited and was just giving you the chance not to embarrass yourself. The assistant's hand hovered over her earpiece. "What's your name?" she asked finally, voice tight. He looked her in the eye. Malik Bennett. Her face paled. That name. She'd heard it before. But not from anyone in this building. She'd heard it in whispers. In headlines. In a podcast episode called "The Homeless Genius Who Vanished." But before she could say another word, the boardroom door opened, and a voice inside said, "Let him in." The silence that followed was the kind that shifts gravity, because the man no one recognized was about to turn the most powerful room in the city upside down. Malik Bennett stepped through the glass doors of the boardroom like a man walking into his own living room, though the executives inside had no idea who he was. The room fell into an uneasy silence. 12 board members in suits tailored to intimidate sat at a long obsidian table. A digital screen glowed with pie charts and forecasts. The air smelled of espresso and overconfidence. The one who had spoken, Eleanor Vaughn, the interim CEO, gestured to an empty chair near the end of the table. Her tone was polite, but her eyes were full of caution. "Please," she said, "have a seat." Malik didn't sit right away. Instead, he set the folded letter on the table. Then he scanned the faces staring back at him. They didn't recognize him. Not yet, but he recognized every single one of them. Especially Eleanor. He finally sat, slow, deliberate, like a man with time on his side. Eleanor cleared her throat. "Mr. Bennett, is it? You understand this is a private meeting?" "Yes," Malik said simply. "And you believe you belong here?" "I don't believe it." "I know it." A soft gasp came from the far side of the table. Gerald Whitmore, head of legal, leaned forward, squinting at Malik. "I know that name," he muttered. Malik said nothing. Another executive, Thomas Green, frowned. "Wait a minute. Didn't used to be." Eleanor cut him off. "That's enough." But it wasn't enough. Not for Malik, not after what they'd done. He turned to Eleanor. "You remember, don't you?" Her fingers curled around her pen. "You're out of line." No, Malik said calmly. You crossed that line 10 years ago. I'm just here to redraw it. Whispers broke out across the table. 10 years ago. One of them murmured, wasn't there a whistleblower? The one who disappeared. They said he forged documents. They said he was unstable. They said he was lying. Malik's gaze swept across them, letting the silence speak louder than any rebuttal. They said a lot of things, he replied, voice low. But none of you ever said sorry. Eleanor's jaw tensed. That was handled internally. You buried it, Malik said. You erased my name, slandered my record, and left me out on the street. Literally. The words hung in the air like smoke. No one moved, no one spoke, because it was true. Malik Bennett had once been a brilliant financial analyst, a rising star at Crestwood. But when he uncovered a scheme of fraudulent offshore accounts, authorized by the very people in this room, he was destroyed. Publicly discredited, privately threatened, quietly erased. Until now, Eleanor tried to regain control. We don't have time for ancient history, Mr. Bennett. You should make time, Malik said, his voice suddenly sharp enough to silence the room. Because today's not about history. It's about consequences. And then he reached for his phone. A single tap. One press. And the screen at the end of the boardroom flickered to black, then lit up again. With names, transactions, evidence, dates, signatures, every lie, every cover-up, every stolen dollar on display. The board members froze. How did you get this? Gerald asked, voice hoarse. I didn't get it, Malik said. I kept it for 10 years. A beat passed. Then Eleanor stood, trying to sound unfazed. Whatever you think this is, it won't hold up. It's already holding up, Malik replied. Check your inboxes. Phones buzzed in a ripple around the table. They looked and found exactly what they feared. I gave you a chance, Malik said softly. I walked in here without cameras, without press, just truth. But if the truth isn't enough, I have other options. Someone cursed under their breath. Someone else stood to leave. But no one dared speak over the quiet fury in Malik's voice. They had tried to erase him. But he'd returned not just with proof, but with power. And he wasn't finished. Not even close. The silence after Malik's revelation was heavier than any boardroom deal ever struck inside that glass tomb. The 12 executives sat motionless, each absorbing the weight of the documents now glowing on their screens. 10 years of secrets, unburied, the ones who had laughed behind closed doors, who had used words like disposable and problem, now stared at the man they once erased, no longer invisible, no longer voiceless. Eleanor Vaughn, always poised, now felt the tremble in her fingertips. This could ruin reputations, she said, her voice tight. No, Malik replied, his eyes steady. This will reveal character. Thomas Green leaned forward, sweat on his brow. What do you want? Money? A public apology? What is this? Malik turned to him slowly. I want change. And accountability, starting now. Thomas laughed nervously. That's not how the world works. Maybe that's the problem. The energy in the room shifted again. For the first time, Malik wasn't the outsider. He was the gravitational force, and they were caught in his orbit, scrambling for balance. You think one man with a few files can bring down a billion-dollar institution? Eleanor snapped, trying to reclaim control. I don't need to bring it down, Malik said. Just clean it up. He turned to the youngest board member, Jordan Lee, who had said nothing since Malik entered. Her eyes had been locked on the documents the entire time. You joined last year, didn't you? He asked her gently. She nodded. Then you weren't part of this. But you have a choice now. Her voice was quiet but clear. He's telling the truth. Eleanor shot her a look of betrayal. Jordan didn't flinch. Malik's gaze swept back over the room. In 36 hours, these files go to the Financial Ethics Commission, 6 major news outlets, and a legal team that's been waiting a decade to move. He paused. Let it sink in. Unless something changes right here, right now. Eleanor folded her arms. You don't get to negotiate terms in a boardroom you don't belong in. Malik smiled faintly. I belong here more than half the people at this table. I earned it. You just forgot. He turned again to Jordan. I need an internal review, independent, transparent, full access. Starting today. Jordan nodded slowly. I can lead it. Gasps, protests, whispers, but no one stopped her. Eleanor stood. You're making a mistake, Jordan. No, she replied, voice growing firmer. We made the mistake 10 years ago. Malik stood as well. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat, but his presence now towered over them. I came here with truth, he said, and you treated it like a threat. Then he turned to leave, but paused at the door. Be glad I came in quietly, because if I had walked in with cameras, this would have already been over. The door closed behind him. The executives sat frozen. Their world hadn't collapsed yet, but the foundation had cracked. And outside that glass room, Malik walked down the hallway, not as a ghost this time, but as a man who reminded the world who he really was. The lobby of Financial Tower had never felt this electric. Whispers floated through the air like static, bouncing off marble columns and glass panels. Executives from other floors rode the elevators in silence, pretending not to glance at their phones, but everyone had seen it. A name that had once been erased now pulsed across their inboxes. Malik Bennett. And the rumors? They moved faster than the truth. He was escorted out a decade ago. No, he disappeared after the trial. They said he stole something. No, they framed him. On the 12th floor, an HR director quietly deleted an old disciplinary file. On the 18th, a junior analyst paused at her desk, reading the forwarded report with wide eyes. And back on the 30th, Eleanor Vaughn stared blankly out her office window, her mind racing. She picked up her phone. Get me legal. Now. Downstairs, Malik stepped into the daylight like a man reborn. His blazer still worn, his shoes still scuffed, but his back was straight, and his eyes were no longer burdened by silence. At the curb, a black sedan waited for him, quiet, modest, familiar. He opened the door himself. No chauffeur, no spectacle. Just movement. Inside the car, his phone buzzed. Jordan Lee, he answered. I've already begun pulling old audit trails, she said. But I found something strange. Go on. There's a buried transaction, a payout, that went to a shell company under a name I didn't expect. Malik's voice dropped. Who? Eleanor Vaughn. A long pause. Of course, she hadn't just protected the system she'd fed off it. How deep does it go? Malik asked. Jordan hesitated. That's what I'm afraid of. Malik ended the call, leaning back in his seat. His mind wasn't on revenge. It was on restoration. But the more he pulled the threads, the more he saw this wasn't about one man's erasure. It was about how easily power silenced truth, and how many others it had swallowed before him. He looked out the window at the towering skyline. How many voices got buried? He whispered. The car stopped 2 blocks away. Not at a law office, not at a press center, at a soup kitchen. Inside, Malik was greeted with hugs, nods, familiar hands. He had spent years here not as a victim, but as a volunteer. No one knew who he used to be. He never told them. But they knew who he was now, the quiet man who helped fix plumbing, carried groceries, rewired lights, and listened, really listened. He stepped into the back room, where an old laptop sat humming. And then he clicked upload. The documents, the files, the offshore accounts. He wasn't waiting anymore. The system would either clean itself, or he'd burn the lies under the heat of daylight. By the end of the day, #Malik Bennett was trending. By the next morning, his inbox would be full of reporters. But for now, he just helped serve lunch. By 7:14 the next morning, the world had a new obsession. #Malik Bennett exploded across timelines, group chats, and office whispers. LinkedIn posts morphed into moral essays. News anchors rehearsed his name like they had known it for years. Comment sections swelled with outrage, awe, and disbelief. This man was thrown away. Now he's holding the receipts. Not all heroes wear suits. Some wear scars. He was erased. Now he's rewriting the story. At Crestwood Financial, the silence was gone, replaced by scrambling. Every executive scrambled for PR teams. Legal statements, alibis. Eleanor Vaughn sat in her private office, but there was nothing private anymore. Her inbox flashed nonstop. The board demanded explanations. Investors wanted blood. The ethics committee had launched a review overnight, and someone inside had leaked the footage. The boardroom video of Malik, calm, composed, unshaken, of her, dismissive, angry, cornered, of the truth, unfolding, on tape. CNN ran the clip. So did Forbes. So did a 19-year-old TikToker who paired it with a remix of Started from the Bottom. In less than an hour, the clip had 10 million views. And the comments? You slapped him with silence. He answered with receipts. This is the kind of man we were told not to become. Now he's the one we needed. In the soup kitchen downtown, Malik sat in the same chair as always, quiet, sorting donation receipts, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. His phone buzzed like a live wire, but he didn't flinch. He didn't want fame. He wanted change. Across from him, an older man with calloused hands and soft eyes leaned forward. You really worked in one of those towers? The man asked. Malik nodded. You gonna sue him? Malik thought for a moment. No. The old man tilted his head. Then what now? Malik looked out the window. The sky was gray, but the horizon felt different. Now we make sure it doesn't happen to someone else. That afternoon, Jordan Lee stood in the center of a press briefing. Cameras flashed. Microphones waited. Her blazer crisp, her hands steady, but her voice? That carried the weight of something new. My name is Jordan Lee. I'm a board member at Crestwood Financial. As of today, I am initiating a full independent audit of all historical financial misconduct tied to this firm. Reporters stirred. She continued. The documents provided by Mr. Malik Bennett are extensive, verified, and damning. Let me be clear. This is not about one man being wronged. It's about how many systems failed on purpose. Another journalist raised a hand. Is Mr. Bennett joining the leadership team? Jordan smiled faintly. He's not interested in titles. At that exact moment, in a penthouse uptown, Eleanor's fingers trembled as she opened the latest email. Subject line, URGENT, resignation requested. From the board. Her power was evaporating, and all because of a man who had walked in with truth, not force. She stood pacing, her thoughts racing. She had always prided herself on control, on knowing the system better than anyone. But the system wasn't protecting her now, because for once, it was listening to him. 2 days later, the grand atrium of the Crestwood Financial Tower had never felt so exposed. The same lobby where Malik Bennett had once been escorted out without a voice was now filled with lights, cameras, and reporters adjusting their mics, waiting for one man. Behind the curtain of polished smiles and strategic PR, panic pulsed in quiet corners. Executives whispered in hallways, HR scrubbed policies, assistants shredded old memos. Because the audit Jordan Lee had triggered, it was unearthing everything: fraud, discrimination, threats, a pattern, a culture, and at the center of it all, the one name they tried to bury, Malik Bennett. Upstairs, Eleanor Vaughn sat at the edge of the boardroom table, not leading the meeting, but waiting to be called in like an employee under review. The irony didn't escape her. The new interim CEO stood across the room, Jordan. She looked younger than anyone wanted her to be, but she held the room like it was hers by birthright. Thank you for joining us, Eleanor, Jordan said, her tone professional but razor-edged. Let's get to the heart of it. Eleanor tried to keep her voice calm. I acted on information I was given. No, Jordan cut in. You acted on fear. And you enforced a culture that prioritized silence over truth. Eleanor leaned forward. I made decisions that protected this firm. You protected yourself. The room froze. Then Jordan continued. We've reviewed the transfers, the intimidation memos, the falsified reports. We have enough to pursue legal action. Eleanor paled. You're going to destroy my name over one man's grudge? Jordan didn't flinch. We're going to restore the name you tried to erase. Then, for the first time, Malik entered. No fanfare, no speech, just presence. The executives turned to him as if gravity itself had shifted. Eleanor's eyes locked on his, but there was no hate in them. Only something worse, clarity. I didn't think you'd actually come, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't come for revenge, Malik replied, calm and grounded. I came so you'd have to face me without lies to hide behind. He turned to Jordan. I'm not here to press charges. That's your decision now. I just want the culture changed. For good, Jordan nodded. And then Malik did something that shook everyone in the room. He extended his hand to Eleanor. Not as a gesture of forgiveness, but as a mirror. You get to choose now, he said. What kind of leader you'll be after this, or if you'll ever lead again. Eleanor looked at the hand, her world crumbling behind her eyes. And for the first time, she didn't have a strategy or a script, only silence. Outside, Malik stepped into the sunlight as reporters swarmed. Mr. Bennett, what's next for you? Are you suing? Do you want to take over Crestwood? He stopped, spoke just loud enough for the cameras to catch it. I don't need a title to lead. I just needed the truth to be louder than the lie. And with that, he walked away, not into a limo, but into the street. Alone, at peace. But behind him, a company was burning down its old rules and building something better. A week had passed since Malik Bennett walked into the lion's den and walked out holding its teeth. But while the boardroom had fallen silent, the world hadn't. Articles flooded the internet. Podcasts dissected every frame of his boardroom confrontation. Colleges invited him to speak. Protesters gathered outside corporations demanding audits. His story had become more than personal, it had become symbolic. And in that shift, people began to speak up. The janitor who had seen Malik fired 10 years ago, he came forward on national television. A former intern who'd been harassed by a partner at Crestwood, but silenced. She wrote a viral op-ed titled, I Was Erased Too. A retired compliance officer from another firm sent Malik a letter. You lit a match. We've been waiting for the fire. But not all attention felt like progress. Some tried to twist his story. Talk shows questioned his motives. Commentators labeled him the man with a chip on his shoulder. One article titled From Homeless to Hero, a corporate redemption tale, made Malik stop mid-scroll because it missed the point entirely. He hadn't come back for redemption. He hadn't done this to prove them wrong. He'd done it to prove someone else right. Late one evening, Malik returned to the place that had saved him when the world tried to forget him. Not a penthouse, not a press studio, but the community shelter on Ashland Avenue. He walked in carrying 2 bags of food and a toolbox under his arm, just like always. The same night crew was there. The same warm smell of stew. The same broken light near the back hallway. He fixed it quietly, like he always did. And when he was done, a boy no older than 12 approached him, skinny, nervous, hood up. You're the guy from the video, the boy said. Malik looked at him, smiled gently. I'm the guy with the toolbox. The boy didn't laugh. His eyes stayed serious. They treated you bad. But you didn't yell, you just stood there. Malik crouched to his level. Sometimes standing still says more than shouting. The boy hesitated, then asked the question no adult had thought to ask. Weren't you scared? Malik's answer came after a long pause, every second. Then why'd you go back? Because fear can't be the thing that decides who we become. The boy nodded like he understood something bigger than his age allowed. Then he turned and ran off to join the others. Malik watched him go, then turned back toward the kitchen, sleeves rolled up. That night, he sat under the soft light of the office where he used to sleep, alone, the city beyond the window still humming. He opened a notebook, its pages worn and half filled with thoughts scribbled over the years. Truth doesn't make you loud. It makes you unshakable. Silence isn't always peace. Respect is a right, not a favor. He turned the page and began writing again, because this wasn't the end of his story. This was the beginning of something much bigger than him. 2 months later, the boardroom at Crestwood Financial had a new polish to it. The walls were repainted. The portraits of former executives had quietly disappeared. The chairs had been reupholstered. But one chair at the far end of the table was left empty on purpose. Malik never returned to sit in it. He had been offered the position, publicly, respectfully, with every luxury they once denied him. He declined. Because this story was never about a seat at the table. It was about building better tables altogether. On a quiet afternoon, a new press event gathered momentum on the rooftop of a youth center in Southside Chicago. No corporate banners, no red carpet. Just folding chairs, raw sunlight, and voices that had once been ignored. A small stage had been set up with a single mic. Behind it, a modest sign read, "The Bennett Initiative, Restoring Justice, one voice at a time." Malik stood at the edge of the gathering, not speaking, just watching. Because the mic today wasn't for him. It was for a young woman who had been denied a promotion for speaking up. For a boy whose brother had been arrested on false claims by a bank guard. For a teacher who had exposed corruption in a funding committee and lost her job. This wasn't a stage, it was a mirror. A place where truth didn't have to fight for volume. And Malik? He just listened. Because leadership, he had learned, wasn't about being in front. It was about being present. Later that evening, a reporter caught up with him as he packed up chairs with volunteers. "Malik," she said, breathless, "you've become a symbol, a movement. People want to know what comes next." He paused, then looked her straight in the eyes. "I'm not the movement," he said quietly. "The movement is what happens when people stop waiting for permission to matter." She blinked, absorbing the words. "And the system that tried to erase you?" He looked at the sky. The clouds were breaking. "I didn't come back to fight it," he said. "I came back to outlive it." In the final scene of his story, not a courtroom, not a press stage, but a small school gym, Malik helped tape down lines for a charity basketball game. Kids ran past him laughing, tossing the ball back and forth. Someone blasted music from a Bluetooth speaker. A smell of popcorn drifted in from the hallway. No one recognized him as that Malik. They just called him Coach B. And that was enough. Because sometimes the loudest justice doesn't come from punishing the past, but from giving others a future. Now you. You were Malik. Would you have taken the seat? Would you have made them pay? Would you have stayed silent or stood? Let me know in the comments. And if this story made you feel anything, share it. Because someone out there might be waiting for permission to matter. Let this be it.